Good afternoon, everyone. So usually I try not to do after lunch crowd because everyone's full, probably sleepy. So I'll try my best not to put you to sleep. I don't have presence like Anthony, so let's see what I can do. And pretty much Budiman has said what I want to share, so I don't have anything new. No, I'm kidding. Okay. So let me introduce myself. I'm Ajmal. So I've been helping a lot of organizations for the past, I'd say, 10 years to adopt cloud. So when I say cloud, more towards public cloud. So I worked with quite a bit of startups when they started building new products to scale up, and also with large enterprises who have a lot of complex applications. So I'm here to share some of the experiences and some of the lessons learned for the past 10 years. All right. So I think we probably all heard about the cloud narrative. For the past 20 years, most organizations has embarked in some form of digital transformation. And for me, that is probably one of the most misunderstood buzzword in the industry. Everyone will talk about it, but when you ask them what does it mean, you'll get like a million different answers. And for me, it's always been about value creation. So I once met a CEO of a public listed company. So I was trying to tell them, and this was like 7 years ago, what does digital transformation means for them. And the CEO was very proud to say, like, oh yeah, we have gone digital, a long time ago and things like that. I said, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Can you share with me what you have done? Oh yeah, we built a website. I was like, what? Oh, that's it? Yeah. Can I buy anything from there? No. Does it help any customers? No. So then I asked the CEO back, then what did he do? Oh, you can just read about us. So, so that's where I think most people start with the idea of digital transformation. As long something digital you put on a website, that's digital transformation. So that's one misconception that I think I've been trying the past 10 years to like, how do we move towards value creation rather than, a tick box of saying that, yeah, I have something, an app, a web or something. So nevertheless, digital transformation has become one of the key, driving force in the industry. And no matter which industry, a lot of organizations continue to accelerate in their digital initiatives and primarily trying to get a competitive edge. But the focus here today becomes a bit more prevalent, especially after the post-COVID era. And cloud has been vital in helping most of these organizations adapt into the new business landscape. Oops. Okay. All right, so if we look at what happened in the past 3 years, so COVID shocked probably most of the organizations. And as a result, many companies had to transition actually their operations practically overnight. No one expected it coming. And then overnight, we just have to find a new way of continue our business and keep it running. So the pandemic somehow highlighted the importance of cloud solutions and for business continuity and disaster recoveries. So if you look at the numbers, this is from Forrester Research. So actually 72% of the industries, even during the response to pandemic, felt that the pace of acceleration was at 70% within their own industry. And one of the key imperative was 80% of them were looking at how do I adopt cloud to help accelerate or even stay alive. I think we all probably been in this situation before. Some board of directors or some big executive went to some tech conference like this, came back with some buzzword and say, like, yep, this is what we're going to do. So my first question I ask always for any kind of transformation, whether it's cloud or not, actually, why are you doing this? What value are you trying to form out of this? Right? It doesn't matter, what's the technology behind it, but why does this change matter to your organization? So why we ask this question is you want to make sure that you actually don't fall to, the technology hype. So like what Budiman mentioned earlier, what is the linkage to the business value that is trying to create? How is this technology is going to enable whatever outcome the business is trying to achieve? So yeah, we don't want to throw in the hype, but it doesn't mean we don't innovate. Doesn't mean we don't explore. We still experiment. We still try to find value out of these technologies. But then at the same time, we try to see how does it map back to our business. So this is why most organizations think is their main driver to the cloud. In, I would say, the 6 organizations that have helped in the past 10 years, the number one driver has always been cost, especially for large organizations. Two factors in the cost. One is to move from CAPEX to OPEX model. Secondly is the reduction of actual cost. And this will always drive most of the implementation towards the lift and shift model. The second most common one is scalability. And this is very true, especially for startups. They usually look at building products very rapidly, test out the markets, and then scale as their customer grows. Enterprises try to follow suit to look at how do we manage demands, the peaks and troughs, at the same time, able to compete in the time to market in their product development. And eventually look at business insights when I have everything from the disparate data sources into a single repository like a lake. So there are other factors as well beyond this. Some look at resiliency, some look at security, but yeah, so the question always goes back to what do you want to get out of the cloud? So one of the biggest challenges for most organizations wants to adopt cloud is the technical depth. Many organizations will have layers of, like a spaghetti of application that builds up their technical depth. And usually they are saddled with this usually because of 4 reasons. One is the legacy systems. As the company grows, there are new tools or new applications are introduced to support. Sometimes the old systems don't get retired. Sometimes it's an add-on. Sometimes they just support particular functions. And it then becomes too costly to maintain. The second part is usually business continuity. A lot of mature companies become a bit more reluctant, especially when they need to modernize business critical systems. That will be a bit too hard, or they're too afraid that the failure is too critical to the business. For some companies, it's rapid growth. If you're in a very fast-changing industry, when I was in telco, because they launch product like every week or every other week, so they just don't have any room for any modernization. And then sometimes it's also limited in resources. So this is where most companies fall into this trap of the value creation within cloud. So if you look at this graph, so this is the typical path of 2 different organizations. One is a cloud native and one is the enterprises. So like any transformation, you have 4 stages. You'll start with the cloud strategy. So like this was outlined by Budiman earlier, like the steps, how to get there. And then once you have the strategy, you start building the necessary foundation and then start moving the workloads and then try to get the full value out of it. The challenges in the most enterprise is the value realization only happens when you are able to reach the last stage. Compared to a cloud native organizations, they actually start to see more value here. And this line here typically represents the fatigue that the organization goes through before they can reach the value. If this line is too far ahead, this is where most companies decide to, or they will declare that their cloud program failed. So, and the only way to reduce this, to narrow down this gap is how do you retire the technical debts? All right, so I'm going to cover 4 of the common pitfalls that I have seen in the past 10 years. So the first one, so I think Anthony mentioned earlier about Amazon going from monolith to microservice about a week ago. This announcement made by AWS. So this was very specific to the Prime Video service and very specific to a buffering service. So this actually made a big frenzy over the internet where everyone went crazy around like, oh yeah, microservices is a hype, it doesn't work. Even AWS, who's the poster child of service-oriented architecture, has abandoned and went back to monolith. If everyone read the fine print, it was a very specific use case that they have moved back to monolith. They still maintain microservices for the other parts of the business. And the other thing was everyone gets religious about any architecture, whether it's monolith or microservice. Both architecture has its own advantages and has its own disadvantages. The main thing is there is no one size fits all for any architecture that you choose. You have to see how it fits to the overall business strategy and your enterprise EA strategy. Because in certain use cases, monoliths make sense. In certain use cases, the microservices make sense. So you cannot have one overarching, you can have principles that you look that you want to be cloud first, for example, or you want to be, microservice ready or containerized or things like that. But that doesn't mean that it has to apply to all. You have to look at the different models to support the different part of the business. The second part, this is always the biggest challenge I face in most cloud adoption programs. Whenever any companies start embarking on a program, they'll usually start with a small POC or pilot. They'll test the easiest workload to see, okay, how does it work? What benefit does it bring me? Then you'll see, oh yeah, I moved this SharePoint server to the cloud and I save 50% savings. And then that you'll start driving that towards a business case. And you will see in most business case, these are the common elements that you look at. You have what's your compute, your data center, your networking, your IT costs, and then you will look at the cash flow. Okay, I'm going to invest X amount of money. So then if I amortize that investment across 3 years, 5 years, how do I get it back within 5 years? So you go ask AWS, Azure, Google, they'll come back with these nice graphs and all these numbers. There are a few costs that typically is not in any of their models or any of the tools out there. One is resource cost. So most of the business case will look at the implementation cost. So the implementation cost usually comes at two levels. One is the actual project cost, right? So project management, project efforts, migration efforts. A lot of cost that gets overlooked is even in a lift and shift, which supposedly be straightforward, just run some tools, you replicate the data, you just need some effort during the cutover. In large organizations, it's not that true because in the state of companies who have more than 50 apps, the dependencies between the apps is very high. And that ends up being underestimation of the actual resources you need to cut over to cloud. And the second biggest assumption most companies make is they're going to use BAU resources to deliver these programs. This is a very difficult, in theory, on paper, it looks possible, but in reality, most of the workload within the BAU team is not optimized. For them to have room to do projects, it's always tougher. That's why you end up either you have cost overruns or time overruns. So the second cost that typically overlooked is the skill set. So a lot of skills, retraining or upskilling will focus on the maintenance engineers or the cloud engineers. But to take full value of the cloud, you need to actually get your app team as well. The business needs to understand the levers. The whole organization needs to understand what cloud means for them. And this is often overlooked. And the third one is the operating model. So in an on-prem deployment versus a cloud deployment, the governance model is slightly different. There are different security parameters, there are different data privacy and information management parameters. This operating model needs to be revised before you can start adopting cloud. And the last part is the cost management of cloud. So cloud is basically like, having water and electricity to your house. So every month, say your bill is 300 ringgit. So you kind of know, okay, I'm using this much. And suddenly this month is Raya, all your relatives comes over, you blast the aircon, they're staying over, and suddenly your bill is 1,000 ringgit. So that's the same thing with cloud. So if you do not have a cost management of FinOps embedded in part of the organization, you're going to end up with all these cost overruns because cloud is made so easy that anything can be turned on. But if the governance and the cost management is not there, it will balloon up your costs. And I have an example where it was an innocent thing where a developer was just testing a function using Azure Functions. And then it was just stress testing it, and he forgot to turn off. So the bill came out to be, I think it was about 20,000 within 5 days, because it was constantly running the function apps. So yeah, this is why the skills, the model, the operating model, and the cost management needs to come in. Okay, the next part is the lift and shift fatigue. So in most organizations, when they start on this large-scale cloud migration, they will convince that go lift and shift. Look at your full estate. Okay, you probably can move 70%, 80%, and that typically delivers roughly 25% cost savings. And CFOs get excited, 25% cost savings. Okay, let's do that. But the challenge we have with lift and shift is one is it takes a long time. As simple as the vendors make it look like, in large organizations, it takes a good 2 years to deliver a successful lift and shift program. That's what I've seen across. Regardless how aggressive you go, some even take 3 years. And when you go such long periods, and especially when you're in enterprises that has so many dependencies, cross dependencies, it is the team develops fatigue. It's just too tiresome. You have just gone through the lift and shift. To look at the other patterns, like okay, let's then move to native services, or you want to containerize. It is one to drive that change. It's quite a lot of them lose interest or just get too tired, and the change in cloud is also about culture. If the culture doesn't change, you still operate the way you are. You're not going to optimize how cloud is being delivered. So lift and shift is sometimes a delay tactic. It's good. It allows some capex to be released, which allows you to invest. But at the same time, if it's not managed properly, you will end up in fatigue, and then lift and shift becomes the end state, which is not the ultimate goal of being in cloud. The third part is the cloud COE. So for any successful cloud adoption, you need to have a cloud COE. So this is the idea around a cloud COE is basically, starts with a small team. Usually they are very small, they are very agile, because cloud experts are also limited at the same time. They're very high performing because they are the type of, people where their mentality is like go-getters. They'll go build quickly, learn by themselves, and then that's why they are, in the COE. And they're used to all cutting-edge services. And they typically operate in a very high level of autonomy, and because they have the leeway to try anything and then come out with solutions. So, and they usually have some visionary sponsors behind them to help them be more successful as well. So once they are there, so they are supposed to be setting themselves as an example. It's supposed to be like a petri dish where, you have an organism you introduce to the dish, and you want that bacteria to spread across the other bacteria and take over. But in a lot of implementation, what happens is it becomes the bottleneck instead rather than being the adoption. So this is where the operating model makes a difference, and the cloud COE should focus on evangelizing the cloud rather than being the one-stop center to solve the cloud problems. Okay. All right. So in summary, cloud adoption, for me, I've seen good results, and many organizations have delivered value. but they are typically with challenges, and most of them go through a dip before they reach the value. So my key takeaway always been three things. First, always understand the why. Why is this being done? So that's always helps to keep the organization in check and always head to their true north. The second one is do not, be religious about the direction you take. It's always changing. You have to adapt what's right for the business, and there's no one size fits all. And the last part is don't focus only on the technological change. The people also is a big factor in the cloud adoption. Okay. All right. That's all for me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ajmal Khan Adam Ashraf. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Livery from AIA.